This is Chapter 5 of Learning Web Design, which surveys the tags needed to mark up text content. The exercises in the book give plenty of practice using the tags. If you have not already done so, please read the book and complete the exercises. Before reviewing the chapter, we'll start with an aside about HTML document structure. HTML is a hierarchical language with elements nested inside of other elements. This gives it a sort of tree shape, like an org chart used to visualize the hierarchy within a company. Thus, every HTML document defines a tree of elements, where the root or trunk of the tree is the HTML element itself, and the branches of the tree are comprised of container elements, each of which has, in turn, an ancestor or parent container element, and possibly several descendant or child elements as its contents. Empty elements and raw text form the leaves of the tree. As a general rule, since inline elements cannot contain block elements are closest to the trunk of the tree, while the inline elements are closest to the leaves. Here we see what the tree might look like for a tiny HTML document. In practice, a typical web page may have hundreds or even thousands of branches in its tree. As you can see, the block elements inhabit the topmost part of the tree within the body, while the inline elements are at the bottom. This general pattern is what you'd expect to find. However, we also see that a paragraph element is shown as a leaf. That's okay too. What we'd never expect to see in a valid HTML document is a block element descended from an inline element. Here we have an HTML document as shown in Aptana Studio, which lets us see the tree structure by folding and unfolding sections of code. In this case, we're unfolding the HTML by clicking on the little plus signs on the left margin. With each unfolding, we see the content indented to the right so that we can see the element hierarchy. Finally, as noted before, the two links are inline elements and appear to the right of all the block elements above them. We'll start with a survey of the most popular block elements and then some of the new ones in HTML5. Since block elements are intended to structure content to make it more meaningful, each block element has its own distinct meaning in situations where it's appropriate. One basic rule that applies to all blocks is that they start on a new line of the page unless we do a little magic in CSS to change that. When doing the first layout of a page design, before we even start the HTML, blocks generally appear as rectangular regions to be filled in later. With this understanding, it's pretty easy to pick out some of the blocks on this wireframe. Take a moment to note a few potential blocks on this page. We'll see how you did a little later. The most common block element is the paragraph, which is represented by the somewhat terse P tag. Just like in English composition class, the paragraph is the most basic unit of text composition. In practice, all text in a document should be inside a block so we can position it later. So, whenever we find naked text, we wrap it up in P tags so that they're properly contained in a block. Headings are used to title sections of text. HTML provides 6 levels of headings. The topmost level, H1, has the widest scope and might be used for the title page. Other levels are used for subsections and sub-subsections, etc. The typeface and other styling provided by the browser will help the reader determine the level of the heading in the hierarchy. One newbie mistake is to select the heading level based on how it looks in a browser. That's not semantically correct, however. Instead, just use the appropriate heading level. If you care about the style used, then apply some CSS rules to make it look how you like. Anybody who has ever had to sit through a PowerPoint presentation, or one of these videos for that matter, knows all about lists. A list is a container for list items. There are three kinds of lists. Ordered lists are typically shown with numbers or letters used to indicate sequence. Unordered lists are typically shown as bullet points. Description lists are a bit less common. They're used to define name-value pairs like those in a glossary. Inside of each list is one or more list items, each marked with LI tags. Just as the bullets on the side can be nested into levels, we can do that with HTML lists as well. In such cases, the sublist is just embedded in a list item at the top level. Here's an example of an unordered list with a sublist, as it would appear in the brackets code editor and again in Chrome. The structure is pretty simple once you get used to it. Headers and footers are new in HTML5. They derive from the common convention of having a header at the top of a page and a footer at the bottom. Headers are used for introductory material for a page, or perhaps a section of the page if it has multiple sections. Footers are like headers but are intended to appear at the end of a page or section. HTML5 includes several new sectioning elements that we can use to give meaning to the regions of a page. They always act as containers for other block elements and usually appear pretty high up in the HTML tree. There are four basic kinds: asides, navigation blocks, sections, and articles. Asides are used for tangential content that might appear in a sidebar. While it's possible that an aside might constitute an entire sidebar, most designers use them as sections of the sidebar itself. Navigation blocks, or navs, are used to indicate a navigation menu. They typically contain lists of links or buttons, and several menus can appear on a page at once. The last two sectioning elements are still a bit controversial, mostly because the guidelines for their use are somewhat subtle, opening them up to plenty of abuse by inattentive web designers. Sections are used to indicate the sections of a document. Got that? The intended usage is to break large documents into more manageable pieces. Articles are used to isolate self-contained work that could stand as separate pages. The overlap between these two guidelines makes them seem somewhat ambiguous, especially when we consider nesting one inside the other. Articles can contain sections, while sections can contain articles, which can contain sections, etc. The situation quickly devolves into chickens and eggs if you aren't really careful. In addition to the sectioning elements, HTML also has a few grouping elements that serve a similar function but have a smaller scope. Block quotes are used for quotations of paragraph length or longer. Pre-formatted text is used to display sections of text where white space matters, most often for things like computer code. Since spaces are often used for indentation in such codes, pre-formatted text is shown in a monospaced font. You'll notice that I'm following the same convention in these videos, showing all tags in a new Courier New typeface and using color highlighting when appropriate. Figures are a new feature in HTML5. They're used for supplemental content and should contain a fig caption to label them for the user. The last block element surveyed by the chapter is address, which is supposed to be used for contact information for the page author, to be displayed somewhere like the footer. It's not supposed to be used for address lists, but many designers are already misusing it for that. Expect the standard to evolve over time to match how it's actually being used. Now for the test. Can you identify all the blocks on this page? Since inline elements are designed to be mixed in freely with text content, the rules about where they apply are more general. Thus, whatever rules apply to one inline tag also tend to apply to others. We'll just cover some of the more commonly used ones, and then a few of the new ones in HTML5. M and strong tags are used to make text stand out. M stands for emphasis and usually appears in italics. Strong is used for importance and usually appears in bold. Other tags that sometimes require special markup include short quotations that appear mixed in with other text, abbreviations where we'd like the longer text being abbreviated to be available when we need it, and citations that mark the titles of cited works. In addition to inline tags that contain text content, we also have a couple of empty inline tags that are often confused for blocks. Line breaks are used to break a line of text into two lines, like a block. However, that is the only way they act like blocks. There are other more important distinctions we'll get into later in the book when we cover margins and padding in CSS. Word breaks are sometimes called soft breaks. They only come into play when a word is too long to fit on the current line. Before looking at a few of the new HTML5 inline tags, we should first note a few changes to some of the oldest tags in HTML. Back in the days before CSS, people often used font tags to specify what typeface they used for text. With HTML5, they are officially obsolete, meaning that their use will trigger an error in the HTML validator. Some of the other original text formatting tags are okay, but now they have special meanings that dictate when we can and can't use them. The old italics tag is now only used when text is meant to represent an alternative voice, otherwise just replace them with M's. The old bold tag is now used for keywords like those used in blog posts. Otherwise, just use strong tags. Underlining is appropriate in only a few cases having to do with spell checkers and grammar checkers. Finally, small tags are only used for things like legal fine print. You can easily make any text you like appear smaller using CSS anyway. The first of the new HTML elements are used for times, dates, and machine-readable data. Time tags are used to display dates and times of day. They include a date-time attribute to say what the format of the time should be. For example, should the month come before or after the day, or should the year come first or last? There's also a special pub_date attribute used to timestamp an item. A timestamp marks an event in the life of the item, like perhaps the publication date of a page displayed in search results. As the name implies, machine-readable data is used to translate a bit of text into something more convenient for a machine to read. People are still experimenting with this one to see how it might be used, so we'll have to see what best practices emerge in the next couple of years. Of course, there's no way for HTML to provide meaningful tags for every possible content. Sometimes just none of the existing tags make sense. For those cases, we have a couple special tags that we can adapt as we need. There are two generic HTML tags, one of which is used for generic block content and another for generic inline content. Divs are the generic block element and work really well for specifying customized regions of the page. Over the years, the names we've given to some of these generic block elements have become standardized, leaving us with the new HTML header, footer, section, article, and nav elements. Spans are the generic inline element and can be used to isolate any given string of characters on the page for styling. Since no semantic meaning is applied by the generic tag names div and span, we have to indicate the meaning in other ways. We do this using the class and ID attributes, which can be just about anything we want. There are a couple of rules that have to be followed, however. Any given ID can only appear once per document. It's intended to single out a specific element and as such should be unique. Any given class can be reused as often as you like. However, all the elements so marked should belong to the same logical type or category. We conclude with a little bit about special characters in HTML. Recall that HTML was originally designed for sharing text physics papers and with a few hyperlinks mixed in. As such, it only allows plain text, letters, and numbers, plus a few useful grammatical symbols like underscores and hyphens. In order to display more specialized characters, we have to resort to character codes. A list of some of the more common ones are given in Table 5-2 in your book. Such codes always start with an ampersand and end with a semicolon. One quirk of this system is that the ampersand itself is represented with a character code. Thank you for following along with Chapter 5 of Learning Web Design. See you later.